Welcome, listeners, to the latest episode of the AdQuick Advertising Podcast, a podcast that explores the intersection of technology, marketing, culture, all of the things you guys care about. Today, we have a really interesting guest. We have Alexa Curtis. She is the founder of Be Fearless, host of the new Unfiltered podcast, and a former Radio Disney host. Alexa, welcome to the podcast.
Welcome.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, you are. I think you're the first person to cold reach out to us. All of the rest of our guests have been people Chris and I always wanted to have on our podcast since launching a technology podcast, but we would never say no to someone who asked. And you're super impressive and super interesting. So we were happy when you reached out.
Oh my gosh, thank you. Yeah, I've had a podcast equally for like 3-4 years on and off now doing it full time again. And for a while I would not accept cold pitches because I was so nervous the conversation would be bad. So I totally understand only wanting to interview people you knew for a while.
Right on. So let's jump in, huh? So I this is gonna, if I don't get this out of the way, it's gonna kill me for the rest of the pod. But what was it like being a Radio Disney host? I have to know about.
What was it like being a Radio Disney host? So many people ask me that. It was phenomenal. You know, I also cold pitched that show the way that I cold pitched you guys. I was able to get Disney to say yes to me. I, growing up, was not a Disney fanatic. So I think working there, people constantly were like, so how many days a week do you go to Disney? And I was like, what? Why would I want to go to Disney all the time? But I obviously love my job and I loved the show. So it was very cool. I mean, it was the whole thing you could imagine, and Burbank and the studio and the producers. I will never forget the minute I signed the contract in the office, you know, overlooking, it was like out of a movie. And I'm from a small town, right? Like I didn't grow up expecting my life to be like this. So I remember signing the contract and just being like, wow, this is wild. I made this happen.
Were you given any liberties? Like how much freedom were you given on the program? Like was it like stringent? Like, can you tell us a little bit more about that? I've always been curious how working for corporate media is like.
Oh yeah, great question. No, I wasn't able to do anything. And quite frankly, that was one of the reasons why after my contract ended, I was like, I kind of gave them an ultimatum, which of course, freaks the F out of a corporate company like Disney. And I was like, if you guys aren't moving this into a TV show, I'm out. And it ended up kind of ending because of that. And I actually, about 2 years ago now, ended up getting a TV show with ABC that was a little bit different, but similar to that show. So it kind of came full circle. But I mean, the contracts are as intense as you would imagine. I think it's also important for people to know I started this blog when I was 12. So I did the entrepreneur thing for 7-8 years on my own. And then I started a job with Disney. And so that's very unique. Most people become interns. They're working in the mailroom. I was a host. I wasn't an actress. So to sign these contracts, behind the scenes, I was getting called in probably every other week or two from HR. And they send you an email being like, Alexa, please come in. And I'm like, what? On March 18th, 2019 at 2 p.m., there's an Instagram story on this large wall of me. You said SHIT in this Instagram story. And I'm like, okay, well, you can't do that. That's a violation of your contract. And I'm like calling my manager, like, what? Like, I always say that word. Why didn't you tell me? So it was a lot of that. It was a lot of growing pains. But aside from that stuff that happened, I learned so much.
I love it. I love the cut of your jib, especially when you're getting in trouble from the police up there. So do you want to tell us? Can you tell us a little bit about Be Fearless and what you're trying to achieve with that before we kind of jump into all the fun questions about Gen Z and all the things that we want to learn from a creator like yourself?
Yes, thank you for asking. So I started Be Fearless when I actually had just signed with Disney. So I had moved my fashion blog to be a lot more about entrepreneurships and startup life when I was about 18, 19. And so I was going to a lot of these conferences and getting invited to speak and constantly walking away like, why am I going to these massive conferences and I'm not making any friends? I don't feel inspired because everyone speaking on these panels is 30 plus years older than me. And that's great. But I wanted to be surrounded by peers. And so I, out of the blue, kind of was like, oh, I'm just going to call a bunch of at this point, you know, my celebrity friends and my successful friends who were on the Disney show and have them show up. And so I made a business plan, pitched it out for a year, got rejected, and then ended up at a conference in Philadelphia, and someone from Drexel was there. And I casually was like, I was like, I've got this idea and it sucks. I mean, I literally said this verbatim. It sucks because no one says yes to it, but I have this idea that I should bring together a bunch of successful people I know and bring them to colleges and allow students to hear from them. And the woman was like, oh my gosh, we've been trying to create something like this at Drexel. Can we take a meeting? So fast forward a few months, Drexel was like, you can have the space. You can do whatever you want with it. Basically, the whole business center, LeBeau, I think it's called, at Drexel, we're just not going to pay you. And I was like, I don't need to make money. Why would I need to make money from this? Well, then, 4 months later, I've got massive sponsorships. I'm not sleeping. I've got people flying from Los Angeles, major executives from Netflix. And in some praise Jesus moment, I was able to pull it together totally on my own. And there was back-to-back panels and, a sponsored lunch from Shake Shack and 500 students. And the response after it was so incredible that I was like, there is something here. And so I kind of continued to pitch it out and ended up getting some more yeses. And then in the past 2 years was able to sell 2 of them to universities. So 2 universities that paid good money for it. And now I've decided that I want to continue to have college students come, but in the same way that Disney had me locked into the contracts, the universities have very specific rules, like people who are not students can't come, XYZ. And so I now want to take it on a bigger scale to where I don't have to rely on the colleges to give the space or the opportunity to their students.
I think that's really noble of you. I think we're at a point in time where the people at schools are learning from academics and don't not necessarily practitioners. I mean, I went to school in Northern California, and I guess I'm probably the exception because like most of my professors were like retired entrepreneurs who sold companies for like a couple $100 million, but like that's not universal. And I think there's a lot of value that you bring to younger people when you do show them that success is possible. It can exist.
Yeah, of course.
Adam, do you want to dig in on? Do you want to kick us off with the Gen Z questions? Because I know you had a bunch of pressing ones.
Yeah,
on the docket.
We'll go through some of those fun ones, and then I want to come back because I have questions about Alexa's journey from blogging at 12 to working in Disney, because that's a cool narrative. But we'll circle back to that. I wanted to talk about like age cohorts, right? So, when Chris and I were young millennials, there was this media narrative that was basically calling us, all of us, like wholesale, lazy and entitled, was like the cliche for all millennials. Obviously false. A cohort of 80 million people can't all be one thing. Now Gen Z is being called, I would say, anxious and depressed by the media. And so I wanted to hear your take, because I never felt it was true when I heard millennials, but maybe it's true more now because of cell phones, or it's not. I'd love to hear like some of your thoughts on how the media is branding Gen Z.
That's a phenomenal question. And I think in this day and age, it needs to be spoken about more. I will also say my perspective on this is probably, what's the correct word? It's aggressive and I think a bit intense, because I've been able to grow up with social media, but also simultaneously build a brand from it. And now I'm 25 and I started this when I was 12 when it wasn't a thing, and now it's a thing. So I've not only been able to see how it's affected me personally, the anxiety, the depression, but then speaking to these students now and just this group of, young, ambitious people and how it's affecting them, and they're younger than me. So I would say point blank, I think social media, of course, is and can be a very toxic place. I think in the reality of this world right now, the most important thing people need to realize is that to get from point A to point B, there is a massive journey you need to go through. So there is going to be trial and error. There is going to be pivots. And unfortunately, people rely now on social media to have that one hit. Like, I don't need to go to college because Alex Earl is making $10 million a year posting on TikTok. And the reality is that that is 0.01% of people. And influencing is not entrepreneurship. So if you want to have a startup or start a company, there is a whole different journey you're going to go on than that person who's just going to post one video and go viral. So the moral of this story, and I have, I could go on for hours about it and I don't want to, but it's that if you want to be an entrepreneur, this journey takes years. And if you want to have a high paying, successful job where you're working for someone else, you cannot go to the table interviewing thinking you know everything just because you grew up with social media and your potential boss didn't. So I think there's a selfishness a lot of these young people have nowadays because they think they know everything, and that's awesome. But it's because you're seeing people your age getting it so fast, and that's not reality.
That's an interesting perspective. And so do you think that's applicable though to, our peers that are in media and marketing, or are you also seeing that for, maybe lawyers or maybe, people who are, I don't know, like working at like a car dealership or something that's like not screen related?
No, I would say that focus point that I just spoke about is predominantly focused on this like 14 to 22-year-old demographic now. However, of course, if you want to be a lawyer, if you want to be a doctor, a CPA, you need to go to university. This is just going to be something you're going to have to realize. And the regulations you're going to have behind your career are not probably going to allow you to be on TikTok posting like you at the beach, drinking if you want to do that. Where in the way that if you want to build a brand and be an influencer or content creator, you can go rogue, you can be insane on the internet because that's what sells, right? Yeah. But then when you're older and that potentially ends or it tunnels out, what happens now?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I saw some research that basically said like the number one profession, I guess, young people aspire to is YouTuber, which is crazy, right? Like, why would everyone suddenly want to be a YouTuber? And is it from like watching Mr. Beast, growing up? Is it like, because when I was growing up, I watched TV, but I never wanted to be like an actor or a TV star. I wonder if it's because they can easily see themselves in a lot of the content and they have that sort of parasocial relationship, watching Mr. Beast and the boys go and do challenges. Is that what's going on?
100%. I think you said it perfectly right there. And I think that is where these content creators, and coming from, I have to say, I hate the word influencer. I'm not the biggest fan of the word content creator because I prefer entrepreneur. That's what I would call myself. However, like I make a living, right, off of what a lot of what I do is the influencer side of things. And people follow me because they think they can do this. And that's my goal of this company is I want to inspire young people to build companies. I don't want to inspire you to get on the internet talking about nothing and making $1 million. If you can do that, great. But to me, that's not admirable. So I honestly haven't seen, I also don't watch a lot of Bravo shows. I was at a podcast panel last night and everyone was talking about it. I don't watch Bravo shows. I've never seen a Mr. Beast video. I only see as like candy bars and the advertisements on the billboards. But I've read articles on him and it seems like was able to very strategically model early on YouTubers and build on that. So that also to me is not just content creation. That is obviously a business. So if you're watching him and you want to be him because he does gaming or whatever, well, like, okay, so what? But now what, right? Like, what do you want to post for?
Yeah. By the way, I was never a reality TV person, but I was encouraged by other peers in my sector. Since I'm in the advertising sector, I should understand reality TV. So I really got into Below Deck is the one that I really like. And the reason I like it is because it's not just people sitting around talking about their lives. It's actually a team of people that are, operating this boat in like beautiful waters in Europe. And they actually have it's actually a cool team dynamic. And it's not people just yelling at each other. It's actually like kind of seeing how a group functions under pressure. And, I actually like, I come from a service industry background way back when. And so I can like appreciate like the cooking aspects and the requests of the guests. So that was like my least like hate watch of the reality TV. I don't know if Chris has watched more because it's sort of something in our sector. Like you kind of have to understand all the weird pop culture things people are into.
I actually, I actually almost was on a Bravo TV show a decade ago. They really wanted. In a previous life, I used to be married, and they were doing like a newlyweds thing, and they really wanted us to be on the program. But having watched the Bravo channel, I was like, I don't want to be associated with this type of stuff. So
Because I could
So,
see you.
that
I
was
could
a
see you
hard
on
no.
some kind of Fear Factor style couples challenge. I could see you
I
on
can
that.
see that. I can see that.
Yeah, 100%. That's my
Yes,
type of reality.
I like that.
So I want to ask you more Gen Z questions because you're our first like true proper Gen Z guest. Do you consider yourself Gen Z or like young millennial?
I don't know. I guess I think people call me Gen Z.
Yeah, you're like right at the intersection, which is super interesting.
Yeah.
So I want to stay on like the astrology stuff because I love asking people how much they believe this is true. You know, from a marketing standpoint and like a aesthetic standpoint, a lot of people in our industry trades talk about how Gen Z really likes sort of like almost a very like I would say like postmodern aesthetic where it's almost like it almost feels like a 90s throwback. It's a little bit it's a little bit what's the word? Like post-industrial neon colors and is that a real style? You know, there was sort of something millennials wanted authentic marketing, quote unquote, and now it seemed to move on into like Gen Z kind of like almost like a Tim and Eric absurdist style of marketing where nothing makes sense, but it shows the brand at the end and they kind of think that's funny. Is that true? Should we stick to core advertising tenets and not try to appeal to cohorts because of what like some people post to TikTok? I'm curious just what your thoughts are broadly. You can answer however you want.
Sure. Another phenomenal question. I have to say, I've done a lot of podcasts, and these are some like really deep, intense questions, and I appreciate that. So I think there's two sides of this story. I also think, more people should realize that the majority of people who are working in marketing and advertising, who are very advanced, like the CEOs, the executives, the C-suite level, are for the most part over 30, over 35. So they did not grow up with this form of marketing, right? And so that's where I tell a lot of these aspiring creators and influencers, you guys want free hotels, you want to pitch airlines. And I talk about that stuff all the time because I do it. However, you need to realize that this media is not traditional. So you can't just call up the head of Four Seasons and be like, what up? Like, I've got 20,000 Instagram followers. Like, you owe me a free room. And I get a lot of questions about like, well, I don't understand. Why wouldn't I say that? And I'm like, how do you say it nicely? You are important as a person. That comment is irrelevant. That is meaningless. You are not traditional media. You are not able to highlight the Four Seasons in Condé Nast or Architectural Digest on your TikTok. And the people, it's sales, right? The people that are staying at a hotel like the Four Seasons or a nice property or getting on an airline are not 12 or 13-year-olds on TikTok. They are people with money who are reading Architectural Digest on the weekend, not scrolling through TikTok. And I think that's a really important focus point because I think it grounds a lot of people in the way that they view this type of media. But, high level, you need to be aware of all of it. But I think it's just more important to realize is new media, like as cool and new as the social media thing they're making it, I think traditional media in whatever way will still be around for a long time because it's not like everyone who turns 30 just dies. Like you've got 80 more years of these people living who are still reading these magazines and putting the TV on, if that makes sense.
No, it does make sense. Chris and I might have other takes on some of traditional media. I'm curious your perspective. How much has the culture war influenced the sort of exiting college cohort? How much are they vested in, I guess, not just presidential and congressional outcomes, but even like signaling their tribe online and sort of getting involved in these like heated us versus them battles that you might be interested in or not? I'm just curious.
This is the only generation, and there will be more to come, that is so self-aware. And I give these kids credit. I mean, so self-aware and so confident to where they can show up and be in an interview with someone who's 50 and a multimillionaire and be like, well, what you're saying is wrong and I'm right. I can't say 10 years ago I could have showed up to a job interview having any idea, even at age 12 or 13, like I see these young people doing. And I think that's admirable. So I just think there's a self-awareness now, predominantly because of the internet. And I think that's a great thing about the internet. And so I think that because of that, they leave university or they're in university and they're much more aware of that gut intuition of like, something is off. I don't like this, or I could be doing something bigger with my life, that enables them to go and explore and become more focused on community, whether or not that's online or whether or not that's in real life.
Chris, you can go through our next question on our list. Wake up.
Oh, great. Sorry about that. I got distracted. But anyway, I'd love to kind of dig into how you work with these young people, and like when they're talking about building out their brands or building out, you know, a business from the ground up, you know, how, going back to that analogy of how, you know, the TikToker doesn't have the right audience that the, you know, the hotel or the travel group might have. How do you educate and inform the younger folks on positioning and the fundamentals of marketing, which is like, hey, your audience is this, but their audience is this. Like, how do you kind of like translate that and kind of get that across?
You have to start from the beginning. And the problem right now is as admirable as these young people are about doing all of these amazing things, they still have no idea who they are, right? And I think this will never end. Like, it's very hard in your 20s to know who you are. And I think people will say, well, you're in your 20s, you know who you are. And I'm like, I started this blog when I was 12. I have done the most insane, I've lived in 5 cities. Like, I have done the most insane things with my life. No money, no connection. So I have tried everything that probably someone who, quite frankly, I know people who are 50 who haven't tried as much as me. And I'm not saying that to be like, I'm cool. I'm saying that's the reality. So you have to be aware of the fact that just because social media gives you this access doesn't mean it's giving you an identity. And so before you can even answer that question, you need to figure out and advise them, like, what is it that you think you want to do? Why do you want to do this? If you want to work for someone else or you want to start a business, what is the business that you want to start? And really, what's your purpose? And I think that's the starting point. But a lot of people jump to that like end goal because it's like, if you don't have it now in a year, God, you're really screwing up. But it's like, it takes years to figure out what you want to do.
And there's so many places where you can you know, potentially, you know, interact with prospective customers. And so, like, obviously there's so many different channels out there. Obviously the younger folks steer towards TikTok, but you know, what channels did you think about when you were starting your business, or when you left Disney, the Radio Disney show?
Probably the same channels you guys thought about. Now I'm probably dating myself, but I mean, I started the blog in 2011. The word influencer was not around. Content creation was not around. So I have that traditional media background and mentality, even though I'm very aware that obviously it's shifted tremendously. But for me, I mean, it was like Instagram, the website. There's parts of me that like regret that I probably didn't go harder on YouTube, that I didn't go harder on Vine. But I think I started so young, and it was me figuring out who I was through the website. And that is very traditional media. And so a lot of these kids, I mean, I grew up with like that Vine group, Nash Greer and Cameron Dallas. And, you know, they were just like the jackass of what, 2015. And they're all my age, right? And so I watched that, but that to me was very odd. Like, I would just never at age 15, 16, like go on the internet doing the stuff that I was doing in real life, you know, like my first time smoking weed in like Mansfield, Connecticut, or like screwing around at like the Walmart because I was too insecure. So now I think I'm way more confident to do it on TikTok and stuff. But back then it was just the website, Instagram, and I guess a little bit on Twitter.
Chris, when is Disney going to have a legal weed show where they talk about? No, I'm just kidding. They're not going to.
I mean,
I'd pay for that.
I don't know how well their media arm is doing.
The cannabis sector is huge. Why would they not want that ad revenue? I mean, for the 18 plus Disney content, is that a thing, or it's like Disney's all ages? I don't know.
I don't think they'd ever go for that.
It's supposed to be so wholesome. It's just this wholesome idea when you think of Disney.
Totally. Alexa, as you speak, you know, it's super impressive. You've been blogging since I think you said 12, which is crazy. At 12, I was taking apart my first computer, getting yelled at by my parents, putting it back together. I was on like game forums, so it was, you know, social media before the current wave of social media, and it was actually like unintentional learning of a lot of the things that we do now online. But you've been like you've been doing the type of content creation that really, I would say, like adults and sophisticated people online do from a young age, which is really impressive. Can you share a little bit about like what led to that, and maybe how you've motivated yourself to keep doing it for so many years? And because you're not posting, vapid selfies, you're actually like sharing how someone can create a business online, how someone can monetize their online presence, like real actually useful topics. I'm curious, like what's the drive there? Like what got you to be so, I guess, like cool, right?
God, I don't know. And I have to say, like, this is a question I get asked a lot. Is like, I just don't understand. You didn't come from any money. You didn't have any connections. Like, you don't yet have 1 million followers. How did you do this? And why did you do it? And I was on a drive the other day. I drove from like LA to San Diego alone just for like the day. And I had this kind of epiphany. And I was like, there is an obsession that entrepreneurs have. And it really is not about the destination. It is about every element of the highs and the lows. And the reality about entrepreneurship is it is so terribly hard and mentally taxing. And it is like a full on state of high, low, high, low. Like even when you're high, then you're low. And I use the word high and low because truly, like I have had many times where I honestly, quite frankly, have thought I was bipolar and sometimes think like maybe I am. And I think that is part of this drive. It's because it's this obsession of where, like, I just don't think there's anything you can describe it as, because I'm obsessed with the possibility that this works. And this, I don't know every day what this is, because every day is so different. But when I'm rejected, right? Like last week, I thought I was going to get this big speaking thing, and then it was a no. And then I got a yes the next day. That fuel keeps me going in a way that most people cannot deal with, this amount of rejection and uncertainty that I have dealt with for years. And, I don't make $20,000 a month just posting a selfie. Like my content is not in that kind of a funnel yet. And that's something that I'm focused on right now, is to where like it becomes more of like a SaaS platform to where like I don't have to post every day. But I think it's an obsession. I think it's just an obsession with the drive. It just keeps you going.
Love to hear it. Because there's so many books on how to, I guess, find your passion or nurture it. And I think some people just have it innately, and you're kind of leaning into your quirks, which is, I think, awesome, because a lot of people fight them, and it's like this existential struggle, and they have all this energy and they don't know what to do with it. And I think, like, from hearing you speak and watching other YouTube videos, I think someone like yourself would be like miserable at like a corporate desk job where you're told what to do all day, and you sort of can't run with all of your own ideas. You have to sort of play within the lines, right? And I think it's good for people to understand what side of the fence that they want to be on. Is entrepreneurship or startups or, independent media for me? Or, you could have easily gone down the other path and stayed at Disney and, eventually gone on to be like a traditional media voice. But I think the indie media voice is much more fun here. I think the traditional, a lot of the traditional media, not all of it, is a little bit, they're a little too safe. I think they're a little bit too safe. And it seems like they want to, they want to, Chris, there's probably a better way I can say this without getting political.
They're short term in their vision, and I think that contributes to it. But I think ultimately what it comes down to is we're gonna start seeing a resurgence in the indies doing thoughtful, quality content, because I think the thoughtfulness is missing from a lot of the they don't give something the full attention it deserves, is kind of where I think you were going with that. Is that accurate?
Yeah. And I think, I think it's cyclical too. I think all of the indie media people will force a lot of the traditional media to do things that, they should have always been doing, right? Because if you're going to have people that actively poke at, the New York Times and also Fox News and say, look, you guys can't run these like, narratives just to inflame everyone, or, stop like tearing down business for the sake of tearing down business to get clicks, right? Like eventually we're just all not going to accept it. So I think independent creators will sort of force the hand. I want to talk a little bit more about what your aim is with your own podcast. It seems like you've had some guests on that are friends of ours. It seems like that's something that like, what's your end goal? Like, do you want to be at like a like a Lex Friedman level or Joe Rogan level? Like, what do you see yourself like when you're at like your end state?
I always envisioned myself to kind of be like the next Ellen, and I really thought I would be able to get there through Disney. But the reality of that is that nowadays that type of media is not as common. So I've had to pivot so often. I can also say that that is still my goal, and I see that and would love to essentially, have just a book and the podcast and whatnot. And I learned a lot about, the hosting and the talent side of it from Disney. But I also find that the older that I get, the more taxing the content side of it is mentally. So I am very intrigued and inspired by creating a company that is not based on myself. And I think that's what I'm trying to do with Be Fearless. And it wasn't a company, I didn't expect it to become a company when I started hosting these summits, to where that is a sellable and scalable product that becomes more of something, like I said, that is selling on its own. Because I'm really intrigued by the tech side of things and the coding side of things now. So it's like 50% of me loves the hosting stuff and the inspiring people and like the Alexa Curtis brand. But the other side of me, like for 18 hours, I could go for like 3 days, I could just spend on Reddit, like going through all the subreddits and responding to people and like subscribing to people's newsletters and like understanding the math behind the newsletter and like how to monetize it and stuff. And I think that's a very technical thing I didn't see myself being into when I had started this. And so I think like building the personal brand, but equally trying to create a product that hopefully one day I could sell.
Yeah, I think the two of them are hopefully interconnected, and people want to be at your conference and sponsor, an event or your publication because of you. I mean, I think in a world of AI and generative content, the humans are going to ultimately be what matters. And if we can run all media with just AI, it's like that's like kind of a nihilistic end game. It's not even fun for anyone at that point. I don't know why so much of the tech industry wants to wholesale replace Hollywood with AI writers. I think AI is this tool, right? You wouldn't like human isn't better than AI. AI isn't better than human. You want human plus AI. You want human plus the tool. And to abstract away the human is, I don't know what they want everyone to do all day in that case. Chris, you want to go through some of our other questions? We'll do lightning round.
No, I mean, like, I still want to kind of touch upon the event piece. And do you find that, because there was a time where, in the last few years in particular, where, the communities kind of shifted online because they had to, right? Because we got locked down and that was that whole thing. But now that you're throwing events, I'm starting to see conferences come back in full force. Like, are we back to the new normal? And then one more question on top of that. How do the young people interact with, in person versus online community type events?
Oh, yeah. So to answer the first question, I would say it's back to normal. And I think a lot of people realize, and I think this is totally across the board, regardless of age, like the in-person connection is critical. I think like everyone doing conferences, and we did too during COVID, as like, oh, this was like great, I guess. But I am someone who also thrives in person. And so the people who I find like my content and stuff, like they want to come to these events. They want to be in person. The ability that they have to give someone a business card and that turn into a fully fledged opportunity or mentor, they see the value of that in person that you don't get virtually. And then I would say in terms of like, I think about the community side and stuff, I've seen a lot of progress on Twitter, and I'm really interested in, and I was thinking about this before our call about the difference in these kind of communities. Like the people that I think follow me on TikTok are way different than the people who follow me on Instagram, who are way different than the people who follow me on Twitter. And I use Twitter as an emphasis because the Twitter crowd is like the tech nerds, the people who spend 18 hours on Reddit, the ones who are coding. And I would say like your guys' brains are just a little bit different. You're a little bit more, I don't know. You're not.
We're weird. You can say it.
You're not looking for fast, stupid content. Whether that's weird or not, I don't know. Some people would be like, why would you want to spend all day on Twitter or whatever? But I see such value in that. And I think that's real community building. So I think though, regardless, people want to go to these events and experience the community that way. And then everyone has their their choice, whatever platform they like that they want to build upon.
Yeah, I mean, you're starting to see this. There's a gentleman named Balaji Srinivasan where he's talking about how the next iteration of countries are going to be like people who just share similar values as demonstrated online, and he calls it the network state. So, like, I imagine that these communities will just find their own people and then find them in real life. Like in Seattle here, I moved here like a year ago. And I just got on Twitter and I was like, okay, who's in my space? Not like my space, but like who's in the tech scene on Twitter that lives in Seattle. And like, I'm great friends now that like I met on Twitter, which is kind of wild.
It is.
Alexa, so you talk a lot about helping young creators put on the right face and be professional so they'll appeal to a brand and can get sponsors or have partnership. I'd love to flip the question because our listeners are predominantly people on the brand side who have the budgets to actually pay creators. And I think the question that I'd like to ask you for them is, what advice would you give them for finding and sourcing and working with cool creators in a way that will get the best result for that brand?
Ooh, so oh gosh, because I've done like a lot on the PR side too when I was like starting with internships and stuff. So I've kind of seen both sides. I mean, I would say obviously it's a numbers game. So a lot of the PR people, I find they still don't realize that like people still buy followers and a lot of it can be fake and the interaction and whatever. So if you're looking for someone to just do UGC, I think you can get away with just looking up a hashtag. Say you're in like the CPG space and you've got a protein bar, like looking up keto on TikTok and finding 10 people to pay. And I don't think it necessarily matters what their mission is as long as they're in line with the brand and like you're a keto brand and they post keto food. I think it's a deeper conversation. And like when I work with a lot of brands, for me, it is very authentic to me. Like I don't really promote companies that I wouldn't necessarily use. And I guess maybe a lot of people are like that, but also like there's a lot of money in like the cannabis space and the alcohol space. And if for me, I was presented an opportunity where the money was right and I got the product, I would say yes. But if the money was right and it was like, you know, like vaping, I've been presented a lot of like vaping opportunities. And for me, I'm just like, I mean, the money is like so good, but I'm like, I don't vape. And I see my sister vape and it pisses the fuck out of me. So I'm like, how can I take $20,000 and like tell people to do that? So it's kind of like a catch-22. So I think if you're on the advertising side and you want to though, you know, work with influencers and creators who really do appreciate your message, then I think sifting through the emails, the DMs that you get, also sending out outreach to them in terms of like, what are your rates, and seeing are there creators who don't just post on Instagram, who also have the podcast following, who also have the website. I've had a lot of success working with brands in those kind of bundle deals because I'm not your typical creator who just posts on Instagram or TikTok. I've got the podcast, I've got the website, I've done a plethora of TV segments. So I'm not only able to charge more, but also give you way more numbers to look at.
Nice. I like that. And I like that you're helping other creators present themselves in a way that's super brand friendly, since you've seen both sides of the trade, right? Yeah. And I think that's pretty valuable, especially for young people who don't have like an ad or marketing or media background. They can't necessarily think through like why this brand would or would not sponsor me.
Yeah, and like I was watching Alexa's content on YouTube a couple days ago, and it's like all the stuff that should be taught in schools. It's like how to create opportunity, there's one video on like why you need a media kit, like all these things that, you know, enable you to go out and get money or create opportunity for yourself. I don't think a lot of that is being communicated in schools. So like you should put the Alexa Curtis curriculum in most schools.
Yeah, I'm glad you say that. I agree. And then I have to be honest, like my YouTube is a bit embarrassing because I've only like just recently started posting on it. So I like these videos are great, but like as of right now, I haven't really promoted it. So some of them are like 6 views, some of them 60. But I'm like, you know, I'm still in the build phase to where like I'm happy to put out content that no one views because I know that someday someone will, or one person may view that. And I think that's a critical part of entrepreneurship is you should show up to the table regardless of whether one person is in the audience or 100,000 people. I think those are the most successful entrepreneurs.
I think that's what stops a lot of people from, and not just creators, anyone, whether they have a piece of art they painted or a song they wrote, from sharing it online. There is that fear of sharing. And I actually write music, and I go back and forth on this with the fact that I can just do this and enjoy it. And when I share it, it creates like this personal expectation that, oh, if like no one views it, I'm a failure. And I know that's not true. And I don't actually make my art for that purpose. But at the same time, like now I'm like writing a check that like, if the universe doesn't cash it, I might feel bad. So I think for some, it's also different if you do something for fun versus for a living, where if this doesn't work, you're not going to make rent. Right. So I think those pressures are different.
The pressure is extreme. And that's where it's like, I say to a lot of entrepreneurs, do you really want to do this? Because the pressure is extreme.
Chris is bold and has like videos of him jamming on guitar on Twitter. And the thing that's cool is like, I see him trying, and he's really good. And like, at no point was I ever like, this is cringe. Like, Chris is super cool. And so like, you have to like, I try and keep that in mind when I'm sharing things online. I'm like, you know what? Everyone is just sort of doing their best. And like, if you're doing something cool and you're real with people, it's like, it'll catch or it won't.
I mean, and then there's something that you just got to put it out there, this like what we're doing right now is like my big, like I've been on stages, I've performed as part of musical acts and stuff like that. But like this right here is my biggest fear. And we're like are we on episode 22, 23?
This is episode 23. We're doing the thing that one of my startup founder friends said to me a while ago that I always say now, fuck it, ship it. You just ship, iterate, see what works, keep going. I think you only have to do 21 episodes of a podcast to be in the top 1% of creators, because of the something like 2 million podcasts that are started, 1.8 million are gone before the 21st episode. So I think for YouTube as well, like even if you go back to like the very most popular YouTubers or the very most popular bloggers, their early posts and their early videos are super scrappy. And everything basically is like reps at the gym for creative work. There's there's like very, very few people who are like, Yo-Yo Ma level virtuosos. It's really just reps. It's really just putting in the reps.
Well, I was also like nerve-wracked when Alexa said that she went back and was watching our pod with our friends from Beehive, Tyler and Dan. I was like, oh shit.
I'm nervous about the fact you're on my YouTube seeing me like talk about stuff with one follower, and now I'm like on your podcast. But where do you think the term fake it till you make it comes from? I mean, imposter syndrome is from fake it till you make it. And that, I mean, it's all like in one circle of, the human ecosystem of like existing.
Well, we have some true fans with our podcast already. A friend of mine, Liron, watches our whole episodes, and that we had him on because he's like, I want to tell your viewers about the existential risk of AI. So now I have to ask you, because I have to ask every guest, what are your thoughts on AI? Do you think it's going to take all the jobs, take over the planet? Are you not worried about any of this? Everyone has to take.
Oh gosh, I don't know. I mean, it's very odd. Like I create all of my own content. It's exhausting. I don't use ChatGPT. I guess I should. I literally just don't. I don't know. To me, it's like my job is to write and inspire people. If I'm asking it to write blog posts for me, like what am I guess it would give me time. So I don't know. Do I think it's taking over? I mean, not really. I mean, you're going to start hooking up with a robot? Like, are you going to go on a date with a robot? I mean, these are there's like very high level aims. Like, do you want to have sex with a robot? Like that, if you're asking, like, is that the way that it's going? Then like, no. Do I think it's great that like, we don't have to drive cars in the future? Sure. But I think everything in between that is just like human one-on-one connection. There should be no more like it taking over the like intimacy or the like connection and whatnot. Because that's not real.
I mean, we've seen someone launched an AI girlfriend, and I think she sold like $5 million worth of like versions of Access where you could chat with her. It was like, a GPT plugin that was trained on all of her texts to be able to talk to people. Yeah. So it might just be, things at the fringes, people trying things. It's an interesting debate though, because, there are some people that think AI is actually going to brick the universe, because once it gets past a certain threshold, it will figure out a way to escape its servers, and then it will go and it will create a 3D printer to print, other paper clips, because it wants to make paper clips, because it decides that's what, it wants to do, and it wants to assert, its space in the physical world. But that's probably one scenario. There's another scenario where AI just takes all the knowledge work jobs, and it will be interesting to play out. Your generation will watch all of this come of it.
Yeah.
We're going to watch too. We're all going to watch. So,
I mean, the impact of AI on relationships, what we're describing here, I think, is a uniquely American phenomenon, right? Like in Europe and Asian cultures, they still have societal organizations that, I think we're a little bit more isolated and insular here as individuals, but
yeah, the dating discourse is already really interesting, because for our cohort, we were sort of Gen 1 that pioneered online dating, and you used to have to send messages to like 50 people and get a 1% response rate, and you'd meet some of them in public. And now, there's they shortcut it even further, where you just swipe to meet people. They have reverse swipe now though too. They have apps where instead of swiping, it's you have a limited number of matches a day. I'm actually curious, like how many peers do you know that have met people that they've dated in real life versus online?
I don't know. So I don't really online date. I've never really online dated. I've made profiles before, but kind of just stopped. To me, it's not my vibe. I'm very much into reading someone who I meet in person, and otherwise I'd rather be alone. I have cool friends, that's fine. So I think most of it is, I don't know, laziness. Everyone I know who's on these apps, 99% of my girlfriends go on dates. I was even with a friend of mine last night. She doesn't like the guy. They're going on a second date tonight. And I was like, sorry, you don't, she's mid-40s. You don't like the guy, but you're going to dinner. Well, I feel bad. I go, just for reference, I had a terrible breakup earlier this year. I mean, my ex-boyfriend totally broke my heart, just ran away and moved to a different city. It was if he doesn't feel bad about what he did to me, and you feel bad about a guy you met on Hinge telling him on a second date that you don't want to go out anymore, what? I was do not go out with him again. But this is a pattern. All of my girlfriends, oh, we're going here, but I don't really like him. I'm do you guys need the free meals these this bad? I will cook for you because this is just dumb. So I think 99%, it's a laziness. I don't know. It's do you even want the companionship, or do you just want the meal? I don't know. But a lot of my friends have met people online, and it ends. And then I think a lot of us now, it's very hard to date. A lot of my friends are single, even in their mid 30s. And a lot of the guys that I know in their late 20s, early 30s are very heavy business focused, to where it's literally they want to hook up and they want to focus on their business. And quite frankly, I can relate. I no longer have interest in dating, because I'm so clear on what I need to get done, and that takes away, the dating side takes away from it. That's why it's the swiping, to me, it's an additional task.
Yeah, I mean, I see it it's just another marketing funnel, and for a lot of folks, it feels like a full-time job.
Terrible.
That's why, but it's
terrible.
Go out to the coffee shop, go to the dog park. I mean, do things you already like to do. That's how you meet someone, right? You go to a library. I'm not saying on the first day you're going to meet a guy or girl, whomever, but if you do something you like, other people who do things you like will be there. Talk to them, connect, say hello. It's not that scary. Who cares if you're rejected? Fuck them.
I do my best work in bars with dance floors. So
there you go. I love sitting in a bar alone.
I'm right there with you, sis.
Yeah.
Adam, where we going next? We're getting close to wrap time here.
Yeah, we can wrap with Chris. You want to ask a final question?
I'll let you take this one, because I'm a little fried right now.
Okay, great. Yeah, so we'll just wrap. Where can we find you online?
So you can find me on social media at Alexa_Curtis, and on TikTok it's Alexa Curtis Unfiltered. And then Be Fearless is at Be Fearless Inc. The website's BeFearlessSummit.org. And then the podcast I have, which goes out every Wednesday, it's called The New Unfiltered. It's very heavy focus on entrepreneurship and startups, similar to how I built this, but more of like a focus on young people in their 20s getting inspired by entrepreneurs who have really done it.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for listening today, and tune in next week for another exciting episode.
And if you like what you heard, be sure to pound the subscribe button, leave us some comments, hate mail, whatever. Thanks again.